What if everything you thought you knew about ancient history was wrong? What if thousands of years ago, beings from another world came to Earth and shaped human civilization? Today, we're diving deep into one of the most mysterious stories ever told. The tale of Marduk and the Anunnaki. These aren't just bedtime stories from long ago. These are accounts carved in stone, written on clay tablets, and whispered through generations. Stories that might hold the key to understanding who we really are and where we came from. Get ready to question everything you think you know about the past. This is going to be a wild ride through ancient texts, archaeological mysteries, and evidence that mainstream science doesn't want you to see. Picture this. It's about 6,000 years ago. Humans are just starting to figure out farming and building cities. But according to ancient texts from a place called Mesopotamia, that's modern-day Iraq, something incredible was happening. Beings from the sky were coming down to Earth. The people who lived there called them the Anunnaki. And here's the crazy part. They wrote everything down. Not on paper, because paper didn't exist yet. They wrote on clay tablets with a writing system called cuneiform. It's like the world's oldest text messages, but way more important. So who exactly were these Anunnaki? The word literally means, those who came from heaven to earth. Think of them as ancient astronauts, but way before anyone even dreamed of rockets or space travel. These weren't just stories people made up around campfires. These were detailed records, like ancient history books. The Sumerian texts tell us the Anunnaki were incredibly advanced. They had technology that seemed magical to humans. They could fly through the sky, they had weapons that could level mountains, and they knew things about science and astronomy that humans wouldn't discover for thousands of years. But here's where it gets really interesting. These beings didn't just visit Earth like tourists. They came here for a reason. According to the tablets, they needed something from our planet. Gold. Lots and lots of gold. Not for jewelry or showing off, but for something much more important, to save their own world. The story goes that their home planet, called Nibiru, was in trouble. Their atmosphere was breaking down, and they needed gold particles to fix it. So they came to Earth, which was basically a giant gold mine waiting to be discovered. At first, the Anunnaki did all the mining themselves. But digging gold out of the ground is hard work, even for advanced beings. After thousands of years of mining, they got tired. They wanted someone else to do the heavy lifting. And that's where things get really wild. According to these ancient texts, the Anunnaki decided to create workers. Not robots but living beings who could think and work. They took something that already existed on Earth, probably early humans or human-like creatures, and they upgraded them. They mixed their own DNA with what was already here. This wasn't just genetic engineering. This was the creation of modern humans. According to these stories, we're not just the result of evolution. We're a hybrid species, part Earth creature and part Anunnaki. The tablets describe this process in detail. The Anunnaki had scientists, geneticists if you will, who knew how to manipulate life itself. They created humans to be smart enough to follow complex instructions, strong enough to do hard work, but not so advanced that they'd become a threat. Different Anunnaki had different jobs. Some were miners, some were scientists, some were leaders. They had a whole society, complete with politics, family drama, and power struggles. Just like humans but with way more advanced technology. The ancient texts mention hundreds of these beings by name. They had personalities, relationships, and personal agendas. Some loved humans and wanted to help them. Others saw humans as nothing more than useful tools. This difference of opinion would eventually lead to major conflicts. But the most important thing to understand is that these weren't gods in the way we usually think of gods. They were flesh and blood beings, just like us, but from somewhere else. They could be born, they could die, and they definitely had emotions and made mistakes. The evidence for all this isn't just in Sumerian texts. Similar stories show up in cultures all around the world. The ancient Egyptians, the Greeks, the Mayans, even the Bible, they all have stories about beings from the sky who came down and interacted with humans. What's really mind-blowing is how detailed these accounts are. They don't just say, gods came from the sky. They give specific names, describe their technology, talk about their politics, and even mention their family trees. This level of detail suggests these weren't just myths. These were historical records. What do you think? Are these just ancient stories, or could they be memories of real events? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let's discuss this together. Now let's talk about the star of our story, Marduk. If the Anunnaki were like a big family, Marduk was the ambitious cousin who thought he deserved to run everything. His story is one of politics, power, and ultimately, world domination. Marduk wasn't just any Anunnaki. He was the son of Enki, one of the most important leaders among the sky beings. Think of Enki as a brilliant scientist and engineer who loved humanity. He was supposedly the one who helped create humans and often protected them from other Anunnaki who weren't so friendly. But Marduk was different from his father. While Enki was content to work behind the scenes, Marduk wanted recognition. He wanted power. He wanted to be worshipped. And he was willing to fight for it. The ancient texts tell us that originally, the Anunnaki were led by a being called Anu, who stayed mostly on their home planet. On Earth, the leadership was divided between Enki and his half-brother Enlil. Enlil was more like a military commander, tough, no-nonsense, and not particularly fond of humans. This setup worked for a while, but Marduk wasn't happy with it. He felt like he was being overlooked. After all, he was Enki's son, he was smart, he was capable, and he had big ideas about how things should be run. The turning point came during what the texts call the Pyramid Wars. These weren't just small conflicts. These were massive battles that involved advanced weapons and changed the face of the earth. The Anunnaki were fighting among themselves, and humans got caught in the middle. Marduk's big move came when he decided to take control of Babylon. This wasn't just any city. Babylon was becoming the center of the ancient world. It was a hub of trade, culture, and power. By controlling Babylon, Marduk could control much of human civilization. But taking over Babylon wasn't just about military conquest. Marduk was smart. He understood that real power comes from controlling how people think. So he did something revolutionary. He rewrote history. The most famous example of this is something called the Enuma Elish. This was basically Marduk's version of how the world was created. In his story, he was the hero who defeated the forces of chaos and brought order to the universe. He painted himself as the supreme god who deserved to rule over everyone else. But here's the thing. This story contradicted much older accounts. The original Sumerian texts told a different story, one where Marduk was just one of many Anunnaki, not the supreme ruler. By creating this new version, Marduk was essentially running the world's first propaganda campaign. And it worked. People started worshipping Marduk as the king of the gods. Temples were built in his honor. Priests spread his version of history. Within a few generations, many people had forgotten the older stories and accepted Marduk's version as the truth. But Marduk didn't stop there. He also started changing how humans understood their relationship with the Anunnaki. Instead of seeing them as advanced beings from another world, humans were encouraged to see them as gods who deserved complete obedience. This shift had huge consequences. Before Marduk's rise, the relationship between humans and Anunnaki was more like a partnership. Humans worked for the Anunnaki, but they also received knowledge and protection in return. Under Marduk's system, humans became more like slaves who existed only to serve. The ancient texts describe how Marduk used both fear and promises to control people. He could be generous to those who served him well, but he was ruthless to anyone who opposed him. He had access to advanced weapons and technology that made him seem godlike to humans who had never seen such things. One of the most interesting aspects of Marduk's rise is how he dealt with other Anunnaki. He couldn't just eliminate them. They were too powerful and had too many supporters. Instead, he incorporated them into his system. He created a hierarchy where he was at the top, but other Anunnaki still had roles as lesser gods. This is why ancient religions often have pantheons of gods instead of just one. It wasn't because people couldn't decide on a single god. It was because Marduk was managing a complex political situation involving multiple powerful beings. The evidence for Marduk's influence can be seen in how quickly his version of events spread throughout the ancient world. The Babylonian creation myth influenced Greek mythology, Egyptian religious texts, and even parts of the Bible. His fingerprints are all over ancient literature. But perhaps the most significant thing about Marduk's rise is what it tells us about the nature of power and control. He understood that controlling information is more important than controlling armies. By changing how people understood their past, he was able to shape their future. This makes you wonder, what other parts of our history might have been rewritten by those in power? How do we know what's really true and what's just the version that the winners wanted us to believe? What's your take on Marduk's story? Do you think he was a real being who manipulated human history, or just a mythological figure? Share your thoughts in the comments and let's explore this together. Here's where things get really exciting. We're not just talking about old stories anymore. We're talking about real physical evidence that you can touch, examine, and study. Archaeological discoveries that mainstream science struggles to explain, but that make perfect sense when you understand the Anunnaki story. Let's start with something that blew my mind when I first learned about it. In Iraq, right in the heart of ancient Mesopotamia, archaeologists have found thousands of clay tablets covered in cuneiform writing. These aren't just a few scattered pieces. We're talking about entire libraries of information, like ancient hard drives storing the history of our world. The most famous collection was discovered in the ruins of the library of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh. Over 30,000 tablets and fragments, dating back thousands of years. And guess what many of them talk about? The Anunnaki. Their activities, their technology, their interactions with humans. It's all there, written in stone. But here's the crazy part. Most of these tablets have never been fully translated or made available to the public. They're sitting in museums and universities, gathering dust. Why? Maybe because what they contain would change everything we think we know about human history. The tablets that have been translated are mind-blowing. They contain detailed descriptions of advanced technology that shouldn't have existed thousands of years ago. They talk about flying machines, weapons that could destroy entire cities, and communication devices that could reach across vast distances. One tablet describes something that sounds exactly like a rocket launch. It talks about fire and smoke, thunderous noise, and a craft that rises into the sky. Another describes what sounds like nuclear weapons, devices that could turn cities to ash and make the land uninhabitable for generations. But the tablets aren't the only evidence. Let's talk about some of the structures that were built in ancient times. The Great Pyramid of Giza, for example. This isn't just a big pile of stones. It's a masterpiece of engineering that we'd have trouble building today, even with all our modern technology. Each stone block weighs several tons, and they're fitted together so precisely that you can't slide a piece of paper between them. The pyramid is perfectly aligned with true north, and its dimensions encode mathematical constants that weren't supposed to be discovered until thousands of years later. How did ancient people, who supposedly didn't even have the wheel, create something like this? The mainstream explanation is that they used ramps and lots of workers. But engineers have calculated that this would have required moving one massive stone block every 2 minutes, working around the clock, for decades. It's not impossible, but it's highly unlikely. What if they had help? What if the Anunnaki, with their advanced technology, helped design and build these structures? Suddenly, the impossible becomes possible. And it's not just the pyramids. All around the world, we find ancient structures that seem to have been built with technology that officially didn't exist. Massive stone blocks that have been moved hundreds of miles. Perfectly carved stones that fit together like puzzle pieces. Buildings that are aligned with celestial bodies with incredible precision. In Peru, there's a place called Sacsayhuaman. The stones there are so perfectly fitted that even today, we can't figure out how they did it. Some of the blocks weigh over 100 tons. How do you move a 100-ton stone block? How do you lift it? How do you position it so precisely? The mainstream explanation is that ancient people were really clever and really patient. But what if they had access to technology we can't even imagine? What if the Anunnaki shared some of their knowledge with humans? Then there are the ancient drawings and carvings. All over the world, ancient people drew pictures of beings that look nothing like humans. They have elongated heads, unusual features, and are often shown with advanced technology. In some drawings, they're clearly flying in craft that look remarkably similar to modern depictions of UFOs. The most famous example is probably the ancient Sumerian cylinder seals. These are small stone cylinders covered in intricate carvings. When you roll them across clay, they create detailed pictures. Many of these pictures show beings that are clearly not human interacting with people, animals, and strange objects. One particular seal shows what looks like a solar system with planets orbiting the sun. But here's the weird part. This was carved thousands of years before we officially discovered that the Earth orbits the sun. The carving shows our solar system with remarkable accuracy, including planets that weren't discovered until the 20th century. How did ancient people know about the structure of our solar system? How did they know about distant planets? The only logical explanation is that someone told them. Someone who had the technology to observe and understand these things. There's also the question of human DNA. Modern genetic research has found some puzzling things about human evolution. We seem to have evolved much faster than we should have. There are gaps in our evolutionary history that scientists can't explain. Some researchers have suggested that human DNA shows signs of artificial manipulation. Could this be evidence of the genetic engineering described in the ancient texts? Could the Anunnaki have actually modified human DNA to create the modern human species? And then there's the gold. Ancient civilizations were obsessed with gold. Not just for jewelry or decoration, but for religious and ceremonial purposes. They spent enormous amounts of time and effort mining, refining, and working with gold. Why? What was so special about gold that made it worth such effort? If the Anunnaki story is true, the answer is simple. Gold wasn't just valuable to humans. It was essential to the Anunnaki. They needed it to save their home planet. The human obsession with gold might be a leftover from the time when we were mining it for our creators. Archaeological evidence also shows that ancient civilizations had knowledge of metallurgy, astronomy, mathematics, and engineering that they shouldn't have possessed. They knew how to work with metals that require extremely high temperatures. They built structures that are aligned with celestial bodies. They understood mathematical concepts that wouldn't be rediscovered for thousands of years. Where did this knowledge come from? Did humans figure it all out on their own, or did they have teachers? Teachers who came from the stars? The evidence is all around us, hidden in plain sight. We just need to know how to look at it. When you understand the Anunnaki story, suddenly all these mysterious archaeological discoveries start to make sense. What do you think about all this evidence? Are these just coincidences, or do they point to something bigger? Let me know in the comments what archaeological mystery you find most convincing. Now we're getting into the really controversial stuff. Because if the Anunnaki story is true, it raises some serious questions about what's happening in our world today. Are they still here? Are they still influencing human affairs? And if so, who knows about it? Let's start with something that's been in the news a lot lately. UFO sightings. For decades, people who reported seeing strange objects in the sky were dismissed as crazy or attention-seeking. But recently, even government agencies have admitted that these sightings are real. They call them unidentified aerial phenomena now, but we all know what they're really talking about. The US Navy has released videos of objects that move in ways that defy our understanding of physics. They accelerate instantly, they change direction without slowing down, and they seem to ignore the laws of gravity. Our best pilots and radar operators are seeing things that shouldn't exist according to our current technology. But what if these aren't visitors from distant stars? What if they're the same beings who've been here all along? What if the Anunnaki never really left Earth? They just became more secretive about their activities. Think about it. If you were an advanced species that had been secretly managing human civilization for thousands of years, would you want to be discovered? Would you want humans to know that their entire history has been guided by outside forces? Probably not. There's evidence that certain groups throughout history have possessed knowledge that they shouldn't have had. Secret societies, mystery schools, and powerful organizations that seem to understand things about science, astronomy, and human nature that were supposedly unknown at the time. Take the ancient mystery schools of Egypt and Greece. These weren't just places where people learned philosophy and math. They were institutions that guarded secret knowledge about the nature of reality, the structure of the universe, and the true history of humanity. This knowledge was only shared with a select few who proved they could be trusted. Where did this secret knowledge come from? And why was it kept secret? Maybe because it contained information about humanity's true origins and our relationship with the Anunnaki. Even today, there are organizations and institutions that seem to have access to advanced knowledge and technology. Military research projects that produce breakthroughs decades ahead of civilian science. Government agencies that admit to studying phenomena they can't explain. Corporate research labs that develop technologies that seem almost magical. Could some of these advances be the result of continued contact with the Anunnaki? Could there be a select group of humans who still maintain communication with these beings and receive technological guidance? There's also the question of genetic research. We're now at the point where we can edit DNA, create new life forms, and even bring extinct species back to life. We're essentially doing what the ancient texts say the Anunnaki did to create humans. Are we rediscovering their technology, or are we being guided to rediscover it? The timing is interesting. Just as we're developing the ability to manipulate genetics, we're also developing the ability to travel to other planets. We're talking about colonizing Mars, mining asteroids, and eventually traveling to other star systems. We're following the same path that the Anunnaki supposedly took when they came to Earth. Is this just natural progression, or are we being prepared for something? Are we being developed into a spacefaring species for a reason? Then there's the question of why certain information is kept from the public. Archaeological discoveries that disappear into private collections. Ancient texts that are translated but never published. Scientific research that's classified for national security reasons. If the Anunnaki story is just mythology, why would anyone care about keeping it secret? But if it's true, if it represents the real history of human civilization, then it would be the biggest cover-up in human history. Think about what would happen if people learned that their entire understanding of human history was wrong. That we weren't the product of natural evolution, but were created by beings from another world. That our religions, our governments, and our entire civilization were shaped by the agendas of these beings. Some people would handle this information well. They'd be excited to learn the truth about their origins. But others would panic. Social structures would collapse. Religious institutions would crumble. People would question everything they'd been taught to believe. Maybe that's why the information is kept secret. Not because it's false, but because it's too true. Too dangerous. Too disruptive to the current order. There are also modern parallels to the ancient Anunnaki story. Today, we have powerful individuals and organizations that shape global events from behind the scenes. They have access to advanced technology, they influence governments and religions, and they seem to have agendas that span decades or even centuries. Could some of these modern power brokers be descendants of the humans who worked most closely with the Anunnaki? Could they have inherited knowledge and technology that gives them advantages over the rest of humanity? And what about the recent push for space exploration and colonization? Major corporations and governments are investing billions of dollars in space technology. They're planning permanent settlements on other planets. They're talking about mining asteroids and terraform distant worlds. This sounds remarkably similar to what the Anunnaki supposedly did when they came to Earth. Are we being prepared to do the same thing? Are we being developed into a species that can spread across the galaxy and establish colonies on other worlds? The gold connection is still relevant too. Even today, gold remains one of the most valuable substances on Earth. It's not just used for jewelry anymore. It's essential for electronics, space technology, and advanced scientific equipment. We're still mining gold, just like our ancestors did for the Anunnaki. But perhaps the most intriguing modern connection is the rapid advancement of artificial intelligence and robotics. We're creating machines that can think, learn, and make decisions. We're developing robots that can perform complex tasks without human supervision. Sound familiar? This is exactly what the ancient texts say the Anunnaki did. They created beings, humans, who could think and work independently, but who were programmed to serve their creators. Are we now creating our own version of this? Are we following a pattern that was established thousands of years ago? The evidence suggests that the Anunnaki story isn't just ancient history. It's a blueprint for understanding what's happening in our world today. The same forces that shaped human civilization in the past are still active today, just operating more quietly. Whether you believe in the Anunnaki or not, the patterns are undeniable. Advanced beings with superior technology, secret knowledge passed down through select groups, rapid technological advancement, and the development of spacefaring capabilities. It's all happening right now, in real time. What do you think? Are these just coincidences? Or are we seeing the continuation of a story that began thousands of years ago? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's discuss the implications together. We've covered a lot of ground today. From the ancient Sumerian tablets that first told the story of the Anunnaki, to Marduk's rise to power and his influence on human civilization. We've examined archaeological evidence that mainstream science struggles to explain, and we've explored the modern connections that suggest this story isn't just ancient history. But this is just the beginning. The more you dig into this topic, the more questions arise. Who were the Anunnaki really? Are they still here? What's their endgame? And most importantly, what does this mean for humanity's future? The truth is, we may never have all the answers. But that doesn't mean we should stop asking questions. The evidence is out there, waiting to be discovered, analyzed, and understood. Every archaeological dig, every ancient text translation, every UFO sighting adds another piece to the puzzle. If you found this video interesting, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We're going to keep exploring these mysteries together. Next week, we're diving into the connection between the Anunnaki and ancient Egypt's most puzzling monuments. Also, check out the links in the description for more resources on this topic. I've compiled some of the best books, documentaries, and research papers for those who want to go deeper down this rabbit hole. And don't forget to share this video with anyone who might be interested. The more people who know about these possibilities, the better chance we have of uncovering the truth. What other ancient mysteries would you like us to explore? Let me know in the comments below. Your suggestions help shape the content of this channel, and I read every single comment. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, the truth is out there, waiting to be discovered.